All right, welcome everyone. We really appreciate you being here. I want to acknowledge that we are based in and doing work in communities that are in the unceded territory of the Wabanaki Confederacy. Thank you for joining us today. This is one of many in a series of learning opportunities from the regional coordinators of Maine's Community Resilience Partnership and also our invited community presenters, community partners. This series is entitled Building Stronger Communities. It's designed for communities who are already enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership, those who are currently enrolling, and also hopefully to get interest from folks who would like to enroll. So I'll share more about the Community Resilience Partnership in just a minute. But first, let me introduce myself and our tech support and our presenter for today. So my name is Gabe McPhail. I serve as one of the regional coordinators in Region 1 of the Community Resilience Partnership. I work collaboratively with colleagues at Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, Greater Portland Council of Governments, and Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. Together, we are Region 1 Coordinator Collaborative, or R1CC. We support communities enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership who are based in York, Cumberland, Lincoln, and Knox counties, and we also serve 9 municipalities in southern Oxford County. I'm joined behind the scenes today by my colleague, fellow Community Resilience Partnership Coordinator in Region 3, Zach Goslin. Zach works with Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, or AVCOG, and serves communities enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership who are located in Androscoggin, Oxford, Kennebec, Franklin, and Somerset counties. He is also a Community Resilience Partnership service provider, so he enrolls communities in those counties as well. And a special thank you to our presenter for today. Matt Drost is a regional transportation planner and scenic byways coordinator for Maine DOT. Matt started at Maine DOT in 2021 after 9 years of working in affordable housing and administration. Matt's also enrolled in the Master of Policy, Planning, and Management program at the Muskie School. He brings 8 years of municipal experience as an elected official in Randolph and consultant for other municipalities. Again, I just want to remind folks who are just coming on the call that this event is being recorded for later viewing. So not to be boring, but just a few Zoom etiquette reminders up on the screen, just to stay muted unless you're speaking. We love it if you have your video on because it makes for a more engaging presentation, but we just remind folks if things are distracting where you are to have your video off. If you'd like to rename yourself, if your Zoom name isn't appearing as you would like it to be, as you would like to be addressed, please go ahead and do that. There's instructions on the screen if you need to know how to do that. And also just a reminder that we'll have a Q&A portion of the morning after Matt's presentation. So if you want to hold your questions, great, but also we encourage you to put them in the chat as they come up. That would be great, and we can collect those and address them at the end of towards the end of the meeting. So a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm doing just a quick introduction about the Community Resilience Partnership for folks who may not know about the partnership. And then Matt's going to spend the majority of our time today sharing with us the topic for today, launching and funding projects with Maine DOT. And again, then we'll talk Q&A. So I said I would share a little bit about the Community Resilience Partnership, so I'll do that now. The Community Resilience Partnership is a relatively new program started last year from the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, or GOPIF. The program is aligned with the Maine Won't Wait 4-year climate action plan and helps Maine communities reduce emissions and prepare for the impacts of climate change. The partnership provides both grant funding and direct support to municipal and tribal governments for climate mitigation and adaptation practices. And I'm going to define what mitigation and adaptation are so we can just understand the distinction. So let's just share quickly about how the partnership works. So communities wanting to receive benefits of what it is to be enrolled in the partnership, like getting grant funding or technical assistance, you have to first go through the enrollment process. So as a community, you can enroll on your own. if you have the capacity to do that, or you can work with a service provider. Like I mentioned, Zach was a service provider in the Androscoggin Region 3 area. So a service provider can get funded through GoPIF to provide you with the support that your community needs to enroll. So there are some enrollment steps which are shown up on the screen. There's adopting a municipal resolution, there's completing a couple of assessments, and then also holding at least one community workshop or conversation with the broader community to discuss what your climate priorities are or your resilience priorities are. You submit those enrollment materials online to GoPIF, and then you're enrolled. And once you are enrolled, you are eligible to receive funding, and I'll mention that in just a minute. So one of the things that is part of the enrollment process is identifying actions that your community wants to take to build resilience. So the partnership provides communities with a list of 72 actions that you can prioritize. These are based on the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan. In the list of actions, you'll see there are various strategies that are based on Maine Won't Wait. So today we're really focusing on strategy A, which is like embrace the future of transportation. We might hit on some topics under that strategy, possibly strategy G, which is invest in climate ready infrastructure, and maybe some more, we'll see. We also want to share with you, just if you're not enrolled in the partnership, or even if you are, what are the benefits of being in the partnership? I mentioned grant funding. You're eligible to access community action grants, which are up to $50,000 for a single municipality applying, and can be up to $125,000 if 2 or more communities apply jointly. You also have access to support, technical assistance, help with grants, connecting to larger state and federal grants, various opportunities to collaborate regionally and with other municipalities. And those opportunities are available to you by working with your regional coordinators. So in Region 1, that would be me. In Region 3, that would be Zach. And we have 2 other regional coordinators in the state, depending on where you are located. So I am just going to do, hopefully this isn't going to be too mundane or boring for folks, but I really like to just touch on resilience, so we provide some framework and context. So what do we mean when we talk about climate resilience? Because I feel like everyone talks about resilience. So for the sake of the work that we do in the Community Resilience Partnership, I really like to define climate resilience as the ability of a community to anticipate, plan for, and mitigate or lessen dangers, and seize the opportunities associated with environmental and social change, particularly in relation to climate. So traditional definitions of resilience, they talk about a system's ability to bounce back in the face of a disaster or in the face of adversity. So what we're trying to do is really do better than just going back to the status quo. We want to make communities stronger, hence this series, Building Stronger Communities. So we prefer to say that we're bouncing forward as opposed to saying we're bouncing back. So throughout this series, for folks that have attended some of our other Building Stronger Communities series, we discuss how communities enrolled in the partnership are using their funds to support their efforts to build a stronger community. They take on various actions that involve both adaptation and mitigation. So just to define adaptation and mitigation, they're both parts of building climate resilience. So adaptation really is the ability of a system to prepare for and make adjustments to both observed and anticipated impacts of climate change. So we're really just like finding ways to adapt, get ready, adjust. And then mitigation refers to any strategy or action to remove greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So climate resilience involves both adaptation actions and mitigation actions. So we're going to touch on, I think we'll be touching on a little bit of both in today's conversation, and maybe your questions at the end might have a little bit to do with both. So without going on further and having you listen to me, let's listen to our presenter. I'll turn things over to Matt, but just a reminder to put your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and we will address them during our Q&A. All right, folks, let's hear from Matt. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Gabe, also for the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen correctly here. Can somebody confirm that you're seeing just the presentation? Terrific. Thank you very much. I get organized here. I will not take up the rest of our hour. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end here. I'm going to offer some overview of the municipal partnerships and other partnership initiatives that Maine DOT offers, as well as how they intersect with the CRP program, and how we can fund some of your climate ready projects. All right. Let's see if I can, there we go. So yeah, here's our outline for the day. Introduce myself and the rest of the planning team at Maine DOT, talk about some of our opportunities, but also the bipartisan infrastructure law. The Bureau of Planning, I should say, at the Department of Transportation includes 3 regional planners. Contact info for the 3 of us is up there on the screen. Myself for Western Maine, Jared for Eastern and Northern Maine, and Steve Cole for Southern and Mid Coast. I think probably the majority of our viewers today, although I think I've seen a name from every region of the state, so there's probably someone for everyone here. But I also want to introduce a couple other folks in our Bureau of Planning that might be helpful resources for folks. Dakota Hewlett is our active transportation planner. Dakota's been with the department for about 6 months now and brings a lot of active transportation experience from the state of Michigan to us as a new Mainer, the relocated person, and he's definitely available to assist with anything active transportation related, from the planning side of things to the implementation and scoping of projects. And probably everybody knows Pete Coughlin, Director of Local Roads. If you've done anything with local roads or working in a municipality, you've met Pete at one time or another. I think Pete's been with Maine DOT for about 45 years and is the director of our local roads center. Anything off of our state aid highway system, Pete will be your primary contact. Although any of the 3 planners or anybody on this list is available to help answer questions or get folks in touch with the right person at Maine DOT. Just a little bit of a plug, but also a highlight to talk about some of the stuff that we've been working on. Someone pointed out that 2023 seems to be the year of planning, and I think that's going to be true. 2022 certainly was pretty heavy as well, as Maine DOT went through a revision of our long-range transportation plan, which is the overarching plan for our family of plans and covers Maine's transportation needs and current assessment, but also needs going forward for the next 20 plus years. We revised our Maine State Rail Plan and Maine State Transit Plan, both in 2022, as well as part of that family of plans. And for the first time at the request of the legislature, but also seeing the need to have some strategic active transportation planning, Maine DOT developed a statewide active transportation plan for the first time in 2022. All of these plans are being finalized now and will be available in their final format sometime in the next few weeks. The draft versions, as well as the summaries and some of the public engagement information, is still available on our website. At the end of the presentation, I have a resource slide that will provide links directly to the family of plans information. And hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to engage with the family of plans over the last year or so. We also have our statewide state highway safety plan, which our safety office puts out. I think it's a biennial report, and that has just been finalized as well and is available on our website. And then last year, in this June of 2022, Maine, with Efficiency Maine and Maine DOT, as well as others in the governor's office and and other stakeholders around the state developed the plan for electric vehicle infrastructure deployment, or the PEVID. That was part of the NEVI funds, the electrification funding opportunity. Required that there be a plan in place to access those funds, and that plan is out. Those formula funds, I believe, sort of block grant style funds, I believe, are on their way to Maine to be paired with the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act funding as well, to really create a network of electrification and charging stations throughout Maine. And we can also talk a little bit about how Maine DOT will plan to put additional funds towards some charging infrastructure, and how that can be assisted. One of those ways is going to be through the carbon reduction strategy. The carbon reduction program was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law as well, and requires states to access those block grant funds through the development of a carbon reduction strategy. Maine DOT is kicking off that process very soon to go through what Maine's carbon reduction strategy as it relates to transportation is going to include, and that'll feature some metropolitan planning organization coordination, as well as some regional planning organization consultation, and with the Maine Climate Council as well. So be looking for some of those opportunities to interact and involve and inform Maine DOT about carbon reduction strategies over the coming months. Most of what I'll talk about for the next few minutes focuses on our community-based initiatives. We've got now a suite of 4 initiatives that we offer as matched programs. I'll talk a little bit more about the funding later on, but first about the scoping and type of programs that are available. Some of this information may be redundant if you've been able to attend a Maine Municipal Association or other similar webinar or information session with any of the folks in the Bureau of Planning. I think Dale Doughty spoke at one a few months ago, as well as our Commissioner Bruce Van Note. So I'm going to give you a pretty high-level version here and how we might hit on a couple specific projects in your communities. The Village Partnership Initiative was new in 2022, primarily as a response to 2 things. One, local outreach and community need when it comes to slowing traffic, focusing on active transportation, and really placemaking. It's very much serving a need for Maine's communities, but also in response to there being so much funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law for similar projects. So we've got 2 levels of projects. One are for spot improvements that focus on the crossings and speed, traffic calming, and things like that, which I'll speak about, as well as, and then the other level of that program, the larger portion of the program, are for transformative improvements, truly village placemaking in places like Sanford was the most recent community to receive a RAISE grant to do some of that work, but you can see the results of that work in towns like Hollowell, Belgrade, Ogunquit, and quite a few others around the state. Maine DOT has had success operating programs like this before, but hadn't called it anything until 2022. We also have our other community-based initiatives like our Planning Partnership Initiative, Municipal Partnership Initiative, and Business Partnership Initiative, which are also available and operated similarly. I'll get into the cost breakdown. But our Planning Partnership Initiative is essentially what it sounds like, scoping of a larger, either a corridor management or a village area to identify some larger scale needs. Maine DOT and a municipality partner together to procure a consultant to do this work, either with an engineering focus and a design complement, or a design focus and an engineering complement, depending on the scope and size of the project. A Municipal Partnership Initiative is the program I'll probably talk the most about today, because I think it really speaks to some of the climate resilience and adaptation, mitigation and adaptation projects that you might be interested in doing on the state and state aid system. And then a Business Partnership Initiative. These are only used in relatively rare instances where businesses coming into a community and has some maybe traffic management mitigation actions that need to take place, a municipality sees the opportunity to do more comprehensive work around an intersection or an entry or an access point. And the business partnership initiative can be split 1/3 community, 1/3 business, and 1/3 state to accomplish some of those goals. Maine DOT does not ask where the 2/3 come from the town and the business. So the municipality, a municipality could work out an agreement with a business to handle more than 1/3 of the cost share, depending on how that relationship can be formed. I'll touch on the couple elements of the Village Partnership Initiative first. Small scale spot improvements might speak to, I know it speaks to a few of the action items that are on the list of actions for the Community Resilience Program partnership. And they're really focused on gateway treatments, traffic calming, and pedestrian enhancements, similar to the NACTO design guide information you see here below. Maine DOT also has a gateway treatment guide available on our website. If you visit our website and search for publications, it's one of the first publications that was released, one of the most recent, I should say. So it's at the top of the list. Gateway improvements could include speed tables, bump outs, improved pedestrian crossings, or even street offsets and redesigns like a chicane all the way to the right. These are intended to be relatively cost-effective improvements. Maine DOT sets aside about $1 million, or has set aside last year, this year, and expects to going forward $1 million a year in our work plan to do work like this. And we hope to do half a dozen or so projects with community match that speak to these transformative but smaller scale improvements in particular intersections. Got another example of a Maine community coming up in a couple slides. And then for the larger size Village Partnership Initiative, it starts with a planning process, usually a scoping process directly with Maine DOT, and then the planning process with a third party to go through project fit, readiness, and gain public support. That includes a lot of public engagement, both virtual and in person. It includes things like safety audits and really gets to the heart of the issue that's being created and provides recommendations for fixing those. And then it's really a plan first and fund second approach to finding the best match for formula or discretionary funds. Again, the bipartisan infrastructure law, I think, created 125 new programs and is a more than $1 trillion program over a 5-year period to address so many of these needs. There's not always one funding source that can fund some of these changes. So we're encouraging everybody to reach out to your planner at Maine DOT first. If you've got any infrastructure project on the state or state aid system, it's to reach out to us, regardless of the funding source, even if that's a congressionally directed spending request, which we're all due to the senators, to the delegation last week, or if you're interested in part or fully in a RAISE grant or another program that comes up, starting by reaching out to Maine DOT to have us help scope that, determine similar projects, create efficiencies, but then layer the funding in a way that makes these projects implementable and successful, as we hope to be a really strong model. But plan first, scope first, and fund second. Real quickly I shouldn't say real quickly, I think I've got a couple slides here about the Municipal Partnership Initiative, because I think it's going to speak to some of the projects that folks may be interested in. But eligible projects are address transportation issues on the state highway system, locally managed. They're not locally administered projects, but they are locally managed with state dollars, and they utilize more flexible delivery methods. The point behind the Municipal Partnership Initiative is to elevate projects that a municipality determines are critical. It's either critical infrastructure, such as a culvert replacement, as you see in the photos here, or a street redesign that has something to do with either drainage or other transportation need. And these projects may be on the state's radar to accomplish, but may be in a cyclical pavement cycle, or only receive a light capital treatment, or are on a highway corridor priority that is too low for the DOT to do in a timeliness that works for the municipality. So projects like this can be elevated and handled directly from a local level. I'm sure people are aware that Maine DOT has replaced a few culverts recently. These photos are from the washout in the Jackman area and are a good example of a project that could very well be elevated prior to a washout, but these are some of the steps you would identify a place that needs the work to be done, and then for a culvert replacement as an example. The next slide here has the word I'm looking for, order of operations for a project like that. To identify a safety or betterment project on the system in some way, it could be an upstream or downstream culvert from a local project you're already working on. It could be a street that has some significance to another project or part of a connected network. You can contact your Maine DOT regional planner first, like I mentioned. Ultimately, the Municipal Partnership Initiative, as well as our Spot Improvement Initiative, are operated directly through the regional offices. We can put you in touch with our region engineer as soon as we understand more about what the project looks like, what type of funding it might be eligible for, and the timeline and the scope of that project. So after working with your planner to scope it, a municipality would apply directly to a region engineer for the funding of the project in the form of a letter and a cost estimate. Pretty low barrier application. Maine DOT also accepts applications on a rolling basis for any of these programs. So you're eligible at any time to reach out to a planner and have a project elevated into the queue. I can't say that they're always, I can't guarantee we're going to process everything nearly as quickly as we would like to, but oftentimes approval processes are in a couple of month time period, as opposed to some of the federal funding opportunities, which might take as long as a year. So it's still funding that's available faster. And we also do have funding available right now in 2023 for some of these projects. So if anyone has anything they're interested in elevating, any time is great. And I know we have the capacity to take on quality projects in the near future. You would sign a Maine DOT cooperative agreement before going under contract for any additional services. And then the Municipal Partnership Initiative requires that a municipality have a project designed and inspected by a Maine registered engineer, professional engineer. So having that person on staff is acceptable, and if not, you would consult with and hire one. All local procurement processes will be used for this process. You don't, because there are state funds and local funds. I should not say, I suppose, red tape that goes along with some federal funding is not required in these situations. So local procurement policies will be followed. And after construction and inspection, Maine DOT will review the documents and perhaps the project and accept it as part of the system. And these projects are, I should say, all these programs are operated on a reimbursement basis. So a municipality would need to have funds in hand to move forward with the project and then be reimbursed. One of the real significant points of going after so many different federal dollars and finding different ways to layer your community resilience partnership funding with other Maine programs is that we can leverage a lot of funds for the state of Maine. As some of you know, the match on federal programs is 80% federal, and Maine DOT oftentimes shares the 20% local match for some of these projects. So if we're talking about larger scale things, we can really do a lot of work for a relatively low local and state investment, which is ideal. Maine and Maine DOT really take pride in our ability to deliver projects, and we have, I think, a disproportionate advantage in seeking federal funding right now. So it is truly, the opportunity is now to do so much of this work. So again, Maine DOT operates these local partnerships on reimbursable match programs. The breakdown is here on the screen for our MPI, VPI, and municipal partnership initiatives. Municipalities with modest valuations can receive up to 70% of a state share. And those communities with higher valuations may be either 60 or 40, or even go as up to 50-50 state and local share. So no more than half would be local funds. And community partnership funds are eligible as match, although Maine DOT requires that some local cash be included in any project. In kind is also acceptable, but still some raised and appropriated cash for any project would be required. Could be a modest amount, and we don't have specifics on the breakdown, but as long as some local cash is brought to the table, you can negotiate with either your planner, regional engineer, or other department at the bureau, other bureau at the Department of Transportation to determine how much local is allowed or required. Just some quick example projects. Unlike instead of being theoretical about it, these are some communities in Maine, plus a couple dozen others that I can name off a few of to reach out to if you're interested in one of these projects and how they might work. One of the more well-known projects right now that we're working on, a transformative village partnership, is of course Sanford. Just to give you an idea of the process they went through for some larger transformative projects, or more than one-off streets or culverts or intersections. The town of Sanford went through, city of Sanford went through 3 different planning partnership initiatives over a 5-year period to determine the right sizing and to gain the public in engagement and support that they were looking for these transformative projects. And the result of those 3 planning partnership initiatives was a successful raised grant in 2022. The reality of such large scale improvements and federal funding is that's probably a 10-year project in the making. So back to referencing that some of these are not as quick as we would hope. These are generational, truly generational, transformative work that takes a long time to implement, but then has some staying power. A spot improvement VPI can be used for sidewalks only, unlike our municipal partnership initiative. And those 2 programs can also be layered together. So if you have a street like, I should say, I think these are actually, I've got my titles crossed here. The image in the center is actually a Paris Street in Norway. And you can see that it's got nice poured concrete esplanaded sidewalks that are in deteriorating shape. We've got some grade issues. There's certainly some drainage issues and some roadway condition issues in this part of the state highway system. So the town of Norway has applied for sort of paired funding between our village partnership initiative for the sidewalk portion and our municipal partnership initiative for the roadway portion, and that includes the drainage, to reconstruct this entire street and redesign it. The image to the right, which is actually on Norway's Main Street, is of a crosswalk that is offset at a 45-degree angle, makes the crosswalk quite a lot longer than if it was perpendicular to the sidewalks or roadway. There are also no bump outs, and visibility happens to be an issue on this particular corner. So the town of Norway also applied for a village spot improvement to have an engineer design a new crossing, add rapid reflecting flashing beacons, rapid response flashing beacons to this intersection, improve the bump outs, shorten the crossing, and make this quite a lot safer. That application came in as a letter and cost estimate from an engineer. Those funds are available immediately to start on that work and to redesign this crosswalk in this intersection. Additionally, Maine DOT offers a few different free signage programs. If you're interested in the rapid response flashing beacons, school zone signs, and speed feedback signs, those are all free through the DOT through 3 different programs on our local road center. If you're interested in any of that signage, please reach out to myself. I can connect you with Carrie in our local road center, and we are currently operating a wait list for those programs, but when materials are available, they are generally free to municipalities, as long as they're installed and maintained. Now I'll talk a little bit about some of the federal funding opportunities. Obviously, I'm sure everyone here already knows that the IIJA established the bipartisan infrastructure bill, law or bill, November 2 years ago. So time's flying. It's hard to believe that we're almost 2 full years into the 5-year bill, and those funds are still readily available. We anticipate the funds to continue to be available, but to go through a planning partnership initiative as an example and look for some of those federal funds, federal discretionary funds to implement a village partnership program. Really, we do only have probably 3 seasons, 3 cycles left for that funding, and it'll be over before we know it. So now's the time to capitalize on those. Again, I mentioned earlier, Maine has been extremely successful seeking discretionary grants of all different types. Having one of our senators on the appropriations committee certainly doesn't hurt that cause, and we're well aware of that the position that Maine is in to lead, as we've always done, but also particularly in this funding opportunity. There again, plenty of new programs, but plenty of existing ones as well. It's called RAISE. Currently, the Rebuilding American Infrastructure and Sustainability and Equity program, grant program, but it's been called Build and Tiger before. It's a program that we anticipate to continue. It's one of the most flexible discretionary grant programs at $25 million for some real transformative things. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a singular community. If a group of communities can coordinate or work together to focus on a corridor of road improvements or any type of improvement somewhat related to the transportation system, this is a pretty good funding opportunity for that. And I'm sure most people are also familiar with congressionally directed spending, or CDS, used to be called earmarks. Again, have an incredible amount of discretion over how they're used. So we're able to complete quite a few different projects that way as well. Safe Streets for All is one of the 125 new programs created with Bill. Maine received all 4 of its action grants in 2022. Local agencies are eligible to apply for this funding. This is one of the only programs that the state DOT is not allowed to apply for. So this is always a municipally or locally driven program. I think we had 2 communities and 2 of our metropolitan planning organizations received grants in 2022 to identify needs along corridors related to active transportation, transit intersections and things like that, but they're targeted at lower cost improvements to the transportation system. And this is only a few of the different grant opportunities that are coming up, but these are all in the next couple of months. This is kind of the rotation we're in, but there's the Protect grant, Safe Streets for All, transit-oriented development, bridge investment programs, et cetera, including National Scenic Byways coming up in the next few months, different grant opportunities for different projects. So just a couple more, one more slide here. These are the resources I mentioned. Instead of providing all the links in here, you could just head right to the Maine DOT webpage. In the upper right-hand corner under resources are all the things I just mentioned, including our 2023 work plan, which goes through 2025, so you can figure out when projects are scheduled. Really helpful to do is to use our click on work plan right there, scroll down to the interactive work plan. You can manage the list of projects in the 3-year work plan by each community. So you could select my community of Randolph and find out which roads will be repaved, which culverts will be replaced, what work will be done in this 3-year work plan, and find ways to tag on to those existing projects or leverage funds to do upstream, downstream, up road, down road projects simultaneously, or influence the Maine DOT projects that'll already be going out to bid to leverage those funds. But then also under resources, links for our family of plan information. We have our own bipartisan infrastructure law funding page for DOT. It's very similar to the one that the governor's office operates, and then our community-based initiatives as well. So with that, and about 20 minutes left, I'll turn it over to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen in just a second. I'm happy to provide these slides that I think can be sent out to everybody here with my contact information.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. That was great. I have to say, I did attend the bipartisan infrastructure law webinar with GoPIF and MMA, and Zach has just put a link in the chat for those who were unable to attend that. But this has been a great overview, and I really love the tie-in to the examples of projects, which has been like really helpful, because I know communities that we work with, they might be working on things anywhere from like you were saying, street and crosswalk improvements, drainage improvements, especially when we're talking about increased precipitation and how to manage stormwater. So just, yeah, it's all really helpful. And the culverts are huge. Roadways and culvert improvements are huge. So yeah, thank you so much for all of that. So we'd love to take folks' questions. We have a few that were put in the chat. So I'll start with those, but then we definitely have time after that for folks to raise their hand or come off of mute and yeah, ask your questions. So I'll just ask the ones that were received in the chat. One was, and I'm not sure if this is something you have or MDOT has, but a list of available engineers that work in each region.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know that it's in a single spot on our website, it's something that I can provide along with the slides as the contact information for each region engineer.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks so much, Matt. And and just a reminder to folks that everyone who's registered for this learning opportunity will receive a link to the recording, to Matt's slides, the slides I presented at the outset, and now we have the additional engineers list. So you will receive that before the end of the week. Let's see. A question. Once a project is approved, I guess it could be with any of the partnership initiatives, how long does a community have before they have to begin implementing the project, and then before they actually have to complete the project?
That's a good question. I believe for municipal partnerships and initiatives, there's about a 3-month window to enter into the agreement, and then I believe an 18-month window to start and complete the project. At least the project needs to be started within the funding year of the available funds, or before, but not after. So within one of our calendar funding years.
Okay, great. All right, I think those are the written questions I have.
I did see a couple other.
Yep.
Sorry,
great.
I was gonna say I saw a couple other popped in there at the end. I can talk a little bit more about the funding for safety audits. At this time, at least historically, we have not funded safety audits on their own, but I would be willing to consider that and find out sort of what our ability to do that at the department is. The safety audits are generally part of the village partnership or planning partnership initiatives when we've hired a consultant and an engineer to walk a corridor and identify those in concert with Maine DOT's safety office, traffic office, region office, as well as the planners. So that's not something that stands alone, but it would be interesting to consider that as a standalone, to identify some of those needs. And I think we could do a smaller scale safety audit with those same Maine DOT offices in a municipality for a spot improvement or an MPI. So we could consider them in those contexts. The other question that I see there, culverts must be along state roads, and generally that is true. Pete Coughlin is going to be our best resource for additional funding and operation of culvert replacement along townways. I know, I shouldn't say this. I will defer on whether or not community resilience Partnership funding is available for townways. But for any of the programs I mentioned today, we are talking pretty exclusively about the state and state aid highway system.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, we could double check based on the specific project, but I'm pretty sure that community resilience partnership funding is that's an eligible use. There are some things where if it's not explicitly listed on the priorities list, you need to provide a match, and that match varies depending on your community size and valuation. So if you are considering that, you can talk to your regional coordinator about that, and we can get you the specific information. And thanks, Zach has put a list of all the regional coordinators, depending on your location, who you can connect with if you want some more information about community resilience partnership, whatever it is, community resilience partnership. Also, I should say, if you are looking to apply for state or federal funding and would like some assistance, some extra capacity, some help managing, the grant process, what to do beyond the grant process. It sounds like for here, first point of contact is your regional planner. It sounds like it's a great, the best way to just even start scoping out the project. But yeah, if you need additional capacity at the municipal level, and that's what your regional coordinator is there for as well. As well, I should say, is your regional planning organizations are also can also be a great part of that process, and usually are the ones handling that. But for the partnership, you can certainly connect with your regional coordinator. And I did want to say too, for folks, there is strictly for municipally owned roads, there is DEP's municipal stream crossing program, and that's a culvert replacement. I think that's what it's called. Am I getting that right, you guys? Okay, yeah, thank you. So that, I think I'm not sure if they do spring and fall applications for that, but we can put a link in the chat to that program if folks have just municipally owned roads that they're trying to get some assistance with culvert replacing on. So are waterway access also included, or is this only roads?
That's a great question. And it's generally, I'm going to say, only roads and other elements of the state system, the system that the state is operating. However, the identification of access to, safety of waterway access can be included in things like a planning partnership or village partnership study. In terms of who the users are, the modes of transportation being used to gain a waterway access could be considered, and generally are not funded through our additional discretionary grants or eligible for our match. But they can be identified, and then those action planning items can be used for DACF, whether it's boating facilities or DEP's additional programming related to upgrading those facilities or making alterations. So not for infrastructure funding, unfortunately, from our standpoint.
Okay, thanks so much, Matt. I'm not seeing other questions in the chat. Are there folks who have questions that they just want to come off of mute and ask them directly? I'm not seeing anybody, but now's your chance while you have a regional planner at your disposal. Any questions about just sort of the process? And great, Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Matt.
Hey, Cindy.
Thank you so much for providing this information today. Much appreciated. We are in the process of comprehensive planning at Schoodic Peninsula, and just wondering the best way to proceed bringing together two communities that are really trying to build the infrastructure for an area that sees 20,000 people show up in a small community of 500.
Mm-hmm.
So the process of speaking with the municipality and getting them on board, what does that look like from past communities that have gone through this process?
So as you're help me understand the the question a little bit. So you're in, maybe just rephrase it in a way. You're part of one community and looking to do a project between two.
Potentially collaborate on it. Yeah. The
Mhm.
peninsula is actually two communities.
Mhm.
We see the same kind of experience, Scudic Byway coming through here, Bold Coast of
Right.
Maine Byway. So there are a lot of infrastructure that's shared with the national park right in the middle of it all.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think back to a community where, to a project that I've worked on in my limited time at DOT, where we've worked with two communities, but very similarly, as to working with one community, we'd be happy to have two different communities sit down, identify needs along a corridor, and enter into, likely two separate agreements from the DOT standpoint, but on a similar project with similar programming and funding. The cost share, um, I'm going to assume, but I'm quite confident that the cost share would be split in a similar way, and the two communities could share in the local share, uh, really increasing your capacity for the dollars raised. Um, and then similarly identify the needs, and we make it a little, uh, you know, plenty of folks at the table to help determine which consulting firm is an example or which projects, and we would be looking for strong community support from both communities to implement the results of that planning process, but certainly eligible through any of our programs to do something similar. I will defer on the community resilience partnership side of things on how to have two communities work together.
I think that's a great question, Sandy. I think there's so many, especially like these peninsula communities that are facing the same challenges where we're like, oh, look at this road infrastructure, but it impacts us all because to get here, you need to go through there. So yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it, yeah, I think that's a very helpful. Thanks, Matt. And yeah, as far as, again, I would say specific project, work that through your regional coordinator in terms of the specifics, because if it isn't directly on the list of actions, it would be something that might involve a cost share, but that can be determined as the project gets developed. The other thing too for folks, if you're not aware, certainly partnership funds, and I think Matt had mentioned this, is match not just for state grants but also for federal grants. So if there are more than one community benefiting from a regional or federal grant project that you're doing, that's $125,000 that can be obtained through the partnership as federal match. So that's another great opportunity. Did you have any follow-up, Sandy, or are you all set?
Just one other question about that related to budget and eligibility. The two municipalities are in different financial situations. Are there certain eligibility requirements on a financial status?
As far as status goes, no. We, if you're speaking more to having funds either set aside or available, we do look for those funds to be secured, whether that's raised and appropriated or a grant portion to be the funds to be secured before entering into an agreement with the DOT. And because I don't have any experience with it, I can't speak to whether one community could have a larger financial burden than another if that was something that the communities were interested in. I can't speak to whether or not how that might work out, but I would pursue the department being indifferent to which community provides the cash, as long as some cash is provided from each.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Matt. Any other folks want to come off of mute? We've got a couple more minutes, so would invite you to get your questions in. Is there a project you're working on, roads of consideration, things that you might be thinking about and just wondering while Matt's here, bounce any questions off of him? Right, I'm not seeing anybody, so I'm gonna assume we're all set as I mentioned, you will get a recording of this presentation, as well as additional information that was shared in the chat, links, and also the slide decks and additional engineers list from Matt as well. So that will be coming to you before the end of the week. Checking my chat. Okay. Thanks everyone. We really appreciate your time today. Many thanks to Matt for sharing all this information and the project examples. Super, super helpful. And just thanks to my colleague, Zach, who's been doing things on the tech end. Thank you, Zach. All right, everyone. Wishing you a wonderful day. And again, anything you want to ask about the Community Resilience Partnership, whether you're enrolled or not, feel free to reach out to your regional coordinator, and that information will also be sent to you. All right, thanks all.